I'm Greg Hunter. Welcome to USAWatchdog.com. With us once again, Andrew Hoffman. He is the marketing director for Miles Franklin, but he's an expert in the markets. He's a former Wall Street guy, and he writes prolifically, just like Bill Holt, who also works at Miles Franklin. They're the precious metals people, of course. And Andrew Hoffman, thank you for joining us today from the Rocky Mountain time zone.
Yes, a pleasure to be here again.
Well, one of your most recent articles this week is about the anti-austerity mania. And little old Greece, a little small country, is all back in the news. That could cause a financial domino style of financial calamity in Europe that could come, go all the way around the world, certainly come here as well. Tell me about the anti-austerity mania going on, and the heart of it is the beginnings of democracy. The country that had beginnings of democracy, Greece. Tell me how this could affect us here in America.
Well, the anti-austerity mania, as I put it in my article yesterday, is really more of a propaganda type play on how things are going. Look, the markets are being manipulated 100% of the time in every way, shape, and form. So they create memes. So they say, well, Greece, if it exits the euro, that's really bad. But wait a second, that's good, because that means austerity was so bad that anti-austerity, meaning prolific deficit spending, is going to be so good. But the problem is that's what's got us all into this mess in the first place. And now, of course, they have levels of debt, they and everyone else, including the United States, that can never be repaid. So if there was to be some kind of debt agreement, which I don't believe there'll be, it's just going to be agree to do more of the same that has put the dire straits. And again, we go back to 2010 when this first started. More than half of Greece's debt, everyone talks about their 400 billion euros of debt, more than half of their debt is from the bailouts that have been given to them in the past 4 years. And so to think that this Syriza party was elected 1 month ago to just extend the same when their debt is at an all-time high, their unemployment, social unrest, you name it, and at a time also when the very euro that supposedly is being saved by Mario Draghi is at its almost all-time low right now, is ludicrous. I wrote 2 years ago, Greece is my top pick for most likely to catalyze the big one. And here we are in that same position. And yet, because the central banks and the PPPs of the world have gone so berserk in suppressing gold and keeping the stocks up and managing interest rates, people create these, the mainstream media creates these ridiculous ideas that it will somehow be good. Believe me, if there is an agreement by February 28th, remember that ultimatum went from the 16th to the 21st, and now the 27th, they change it every day. If there is an agreement, it's only going to be bad for everybody. It's going to be bad for the euro and bad for Greece. And of course, if there is no agreement, well, there's your end game right there, because they're not just going to leave the euro, they're going to default on their debt. That's the only way that Greece can be saved. The nation of Greece, 5,000 plus years old, the only way that it can be saved is if it gets rid of its debt, which is the same for just about everywhere else.
Well, you say, and I don't want to gloss over this, that the problem is this: we have debt that's never going to be repaid. Talk about that. I mean, Greece has got too much; they can't pay that back. The eurozone can't pay the debt they have back. The United States has 18 trillion. That's just a cash deficit. That's never going to be repaid.
Right, but we do have the printing press as the reserve currency, and as I've said all along, we've had so many people, even in our space, that have been saying, quote, the dollar is going to collapse, the dollar index is going to go to 50 and all this stuff. I said there's not a chance that could happen. I wrote it 2 years ago, because any crisis that's bad enough to make the dollar fall that bad is going to be something that's going to destroy the currencies that are not the reserve currencies quicker. Which is why since the 2011, when the Eurozone crisis and the U.S. got stripped of its AAA rating, that's when the real money printing started. That's when QE3 started, when Abenomics started, when Draghi was forced to say whatever it takes, et cetera, et cetera. When all that money printing started, everyone went berserk, the central bank printing presses. It caused an exportation of inflation by those with the reserve currencies to everyone else. So the average currency around the world is now down 40% in the last 4 years, since the U.S. started ramping up its printing presses and driving its own debt from 14 trillion to 18 trillion.
Well, when you take a look at this money printing, the question is, and you're the precious metals people, let's come around to gold. Why in the world do we not have spiking gold prices? Is it just because it's manipulated, or is it because the dollar is so strong that it's weighing down that and weighing down oil? Of course, you say everything's manipulated, and I have a hard time arguing with you. I mean, when the central banks are getting volume discounts on trades at CME, Anyway, so why isn't gold higher?
Well, it's exactly as you said, and again, that this is a conversation that it would take hours to take. Obviously, I started, my roots were in GATA back in 2002 and 2003, so I've been studying this forever, and anyone that reads me knows that I've probably done more articles of the specific machinations of what they do than anybody. But when it comes down to it is, they need to do this. This is the ultimate in can kicking. It's the equivalent of why Japan has to do Abenomics and then expand it, or why the Swiss bank has to peg the euro, and then when it collapses 3 weeks later to say, well, we're going to do it a peg at another rate, or why the U.S. says that they won't print money, but they do. Remember, Bernanke said we're not monetizing debt, or why Draghi says we'll do whatever it takes to save the euro, and in doing so, he's printing €1 trillion, which is certainly not something that will save it. Every manner of market right now is being manipulated. As far as gold and silver, we are seeing record demand around the world. 2013 was a record year. 2014 was a record year. And starting 2015, I think the gold imports in China have been 50% above last year's levels to start this year. And of course, then there's going to be the supply response, which I'm writing about today. Just look at the earnings of the gold mining companies. They're decimated. Look at Goldfields and Kinross last week. A couple of days from now, you're going to see the majors, and I predicted Armageddon. I think they're all going to merge. They're going to cut whatever's left of their businesses to the bone. There's going to be no supply out there, particularly in silver, at the same time that demand is surging, and that's why it makes the ability of this cartel of the same people that are printing the money to keep gold and silver in check that much more tenuous.
Well, that means that if what you're saying is true, that the miners, they're just not producing. If they're not producing, aren't we getting set up for a big boomerang in price just based on the laws of supply and demand? And to your point, economic mother nature?
Yes. It's hilarious because, for years everyone was so scared of oil prices being so high. But then when they fall down and the mainstream media sees, well, the stock market hasn't fallen, I guess that's a good thing. So maybe we want prices lower, but at the same time, then you start to see the unemployment surge. So then the oil prices have to go back up. But the thing is, then they don't have to go back up. You have the polar opposite in the oil business as you have in the mining business right now. You have a relentless amount of supply that's on stream right now and coming on stream, and you have a relentless amount of government budgetary spending that's dependent on higher prices. And a war, a market share war going on. So no matter what the price is, you're just going to see more and more supply come on. In gold and silver mining, you have record demand right now, and yet you're going to see supply continue to fall ad infinitum. There's been no discoveries for the past decade, for more than a decade. There's been no capital spending for the past decade. And so I think you're going to see, again, oil, plunging demand and surging supply, gold and silver, surging demand and plunging supply. And, when it comes to silver, there's almost no inventories to start with. So, you're sitting at a very, very desperate situation in both ends that I think it's pretty clear that economic mother nature is going to resolve.
You think that gold and silver prices much higher by the end of the year, with or without manipulation?
Well, again, end of the year, it's not like 5 years. It's not like one of these, the long-term gold will be higher. We're talking about an extremely, extremely tight supply-demand balance in gold and silver right now, as the Eastern Hemisphere buys it like it's going out of style. In fact, just a week from now, the Indian government is likely to get rid of all those onerous tariffs, the 10% import tariffs on gold and silver. They propose to take them down to 2%. And India is typically an even bigger buyer of gold than China is. So again, and this is the same time that the rupee is falling and demand is surging. So, it's hard to believe with all the things going on in the world, much less the geopolitical tensions, the threat of the euro falling apart, and the collapsing U.S. economy. It's hard to believe that, we'll be sitting here 10 months from now and they'll still have been able to keep prices down.
And I'm going to circle back around to Greece because that's the real near-term fly in the ointment. I mean, if they cut a deal and extend this thing, then Greece, then Italy, Spain, Portugal, Ireland, they're all going to say, hey, we want a deal. Doesn't that blow things up? That's A. B, if they leave and they default on their debt with all these derivatives, doesn't that blow things up? So aren't we in a situation where Greece, one way or the other, is going to blow things up in Europe in terms of touching off another financial calamity?
Yes, it's the ultimate Hobson's choice. And again, the markets are goosed by the powers that be. They get the stock market up, so then the mainstream media write, well, markets are excited about a deal, right? Even though Greece says there's going to be no deal, even though there's literally no deal on the table right now, and the only thing that the Eurogroup has really proposed is more of the same, which is what Greece voted Syriza in power to not do. So when people just say blindly, because, the stock market's up, they expect a deal, what exactly deal are they expecting? Are they expecting them to extend the bailout? Did 40% of Greece's population vote Syriza in to exactly what the prior administration was doing? Have Yanis Varoufakis and Alexis Tsipras literally been lying? Are they going to forsake what their mandate was, getting elected 3 weeks ago? Not to mention their extremely, extremely loud rhetoric that is going on as we speak. Are they going to say, yes, okay, you can extend this, give us another $100 billion of debt that we can't repay? I mean, first of all, if they do that, it's only going to make things worse for everyone else, because it's just going to be more debt that has to be monetized by the European Union and more debt that's going to saddle down the European economy. But I just don't think that's going to happen. I don't think Alexis Tsipras came into power to just kowtow to the European Senate. I mean, it's taken 5 years for the European people to put someone in who's going to stand up to them. So I just can't even imagine what deal would be on the table. And of course, as you said, if they leave, we're talking about defaulting on hundreds of billions of euros of debt and all the other pigs and everyone else doing the same thing.
Whew. And right now they have bank runs. Supposedly, we keep getting these fits and starts of bank runs in Greece. They have bank runs. Could bank runs come to America?
Well, they certainly could. The funny thing is with Greece, how it's gotten pathetic. There's bank runs going on today because the talks didn't go well. So some of the Greeks, the few Greeks that have any money left, they're going, "Oh, please do a deal so we won't have a bank run and lose our money." But it doesn't work in Greece like that. It's not like Switzerland or Scotland where the politicians could say, if you vote against Save Our Swiss Gold, or you vote for Save Our Swiss Gold, or you vote for Scotland's secession, the stock market's going to fall and you're going to lose. This isn't Greece where everything's been destroyed already. A handful of people that have a couple dollars or euros in the bank isn't going to change anything. The majority of people want to change the system. They are angry. They are angry at Goldman Sachs, who helped them hide their debt. They're angry at the European group for putting them in this bailing out mode where they call themselves a debt colony. And they want out. They're proud people who want to start all over again. So I don't think there's really any deal. I don't think there's any way to propagandize them that there's a way to extend what they're doing. I think they're going to eventually have to leave the euro and get out, and it's going to be the same. Look, these parties, these Syriza-like parties, are everywhere. I mean, think about it. In Spain, this Podemos party is less than a year old, and they're probably going to win the presidency in December.
These are communists.
Yeah. Can you imagine if that happened here? Like a new party formed right now and won the presidency next year? That's how much people want the same thing in Spain. Not to mention Catalonia just voted in November 81% to 4% to secede from Spain, and that's 25% of Spain's revenues. And then you have in France, this Marine Le Pen is likely to be the next president from the National Front Party of France. In Italy, Beppe Grillo's five-star movement wants out of the euro as well. So again, there's a lot that hinges on this decision by Greece, and I don't see any deal being made. I just can't see what kind of deal they would make.
I can't see it lasting through the summer without some big dislocation.
Yeah, and it's kind of like you brought up at the beginning of this call, you want to talk about the Ukraine. It's kind of like the hollowness of this Ukrainian ceasefire. Now, we're talking about just weeks ago. I mean, even weeks ago, major sanctions being put on Russia by Europe, by Merkel. I mean, accusing him of attacking the Ukraine when there's still no proof of that. And then you see last week on Thursday, Merkel and Francois Hollande of France, as if anyone cares about him, are meeting with Putin to make a ceasefire. Putin hates these people and could not care less about them, has all the cards because he's sent gas. And then they say, yeah, I spent all day and they had a ceasefire. And I'm going, do you really believe that there's a ceasefire or that Putin would listen to these people? And here we are 2 days later, and there's massive fighting breaking out as if there was no agreement. That would be the equivalent of them making some kind of deal where they say, oh, yeah, sure, we'll keep doing the bailout thing. It's not going to happen. And if they do, it's just going to be cosmetic and people will laugh at it.
What about this ISIS thing where they chopped all these heads off of, 21 Christians, they chopped their heads off in Libya, and it's gaining global traction. I think the whole thing was started by a funding error. We funded these people, and it's now backfired. And it's going crazy.
It's more of the same. As things get worse in the economic world, things get worse in the geopolitical world, and we're right in the middle of it making dumb decisions. And, of course, last week you see Obama, he wants full war authorization to go do whatever he wants. We already have troops on the ground in Iraq, even though we were promised otherwise. So, again, all this does is create ways for people to hate America and isolate us, and, of course, ways for us to print more dollars that devalue it. But, of course, they'll say the GDP is higher. They'll say, well, look, the defense contractors built bombs, so GDP is higher. But it's just part and parcel of a system that's falling apart. And we have the reserve currency, so we have more leeway to make decisions, dumb decisions like going into the Middle East and bombing some ambiguous group. But it's not gonna stop. All these things we talk about are only going to get worse as the money printing get worse. There's a direct correlation. And believe me, if there is an agreement with Greece, you're talking about money printing off the roof to monetize those new Greek bonds.
And you're saying that this war and rumors of war, this all comes down to unsound money and printing bonds.
Well, people are
printing
angry.
money to pay off the bonds.
Again, the average currency since mid-2011 is down about 40% against the dollar. Some far more. And when I say some, I'm not talking about the Zimbabwe dollar. I'm talking about major currencies: the euro, the ruble, the yen. I mean, major currencies around the world. The Brazilian real, all-time low. South African rand, all-time low. Canadian dollar, Australian dollar, Indonesian rupiah, Turkish lira, across the board. All of South America, Venezuela, Argentina, you name it, everything. So people are angry because they're losing their purchasing power. The only people that are gaining out of this are the, quote, 1% that receive the free money and get to invest it in the goose market. So the wealth disparity grows larger. People grow more angry, and that's why the Greeks vote in Syriza, why the Spanish vote in Podemos, and et cetera, et cetera.
What's the end game here? I mean, is there a bunch of people that are puppet mastering all this, and they're going to have some grand scheme, or is this just way out of control? I mean, I heard Martin Armstrong say we could only be so lucky. And Martin, who came up with economic confidence models, he said something like, "We could only be so lucky that people are actually in control of this, and they're not." What's your take on the end game here? What's the end game? What do you think is going to end up ultimately happening?
Well, I typically disagree with him on most everything, but on that I would agree, and I've said all along for all the, quote, conspiracy theorists that say there's people pulling the strings, there's the Rothschilds, there are not a group of people that are running the whole world. There are groups of people in each individual country that have a lot of power, and the groups of people in the richest countries like the United States or Germany have the ability to have meetings with each other and collude somewhat on policy. But for the most part, it's every man for himself. That's why the number one story you're seeing in the media right now is global currency wars. This is not people that are working together. This is the Japanese doing Abenomics. This is Draghi doing. Remember Draghi? He said the day before ECB, yeah, we're going to do 50 billion a month of QE. But when the euro didn't fall enough, the next day they said, okay, let's do 60 billion. The point is these people have no idea what they're doing. They're literally kicking the can. They are blessed in some cases with having bigger currencies than others, like the dollar. And of course they have the world's best, most advanced technological weapons of mass financial destruction, meaning the algorithms, the abilities to move markets around paper markets that is. But again, economic Mother Nature, has a supply-demand curve for oil, for gold, for all kinds of things. And the fact that you're seeing, the only things that they really still have control of are these big cap market indexes like the Dow and the DAX and the Nikkei and the paper gold price. as opposed to the physical price. Everything else, they've lost control of bond yields, they've lost control of commodities, of currencies, certainly of economies, of geopolitical stability. So it's only a matter of time before, as I call them, the last to go markets go, at which point you're going to see, I'm not saying it will be the worst case scenario, but it's certainly going to be one of much higher gold and silver prices. It's going to be one of much lower economic activity and much higher social unrest and geopolitical tension.
Could you lose all your money in the stock market if these brokerages start doing, an MF Global?
Well, remember, we have all-time low retail participation in the stock market. So again, it's only, quote, the 1% that really have material positions in the stock market. But yes, you can lose your money in anything. I haven't had a stock market position in 4 years. I haven't had a non-mining stock market position in 15 because I don't trust anything they do. They can move markets at will. They can decide we're going to crash, run the markets up. And if you're talking about valuations, everything is overvalued. The only sector that's undervalued is mining. The only problem is the miners are all bankrupt and they're naked short into oblivion. So there's really no value in the markets. And at any point, you could have any one of a number of black swans hit the market, starting with Greece.
Andrew Hoffman, you are the one of the marketing director at Miles Franklin, but you are a prolific writer, one of the top writers. You and Bill Holter just kill it every week with multiple articles. So I appreciate it. Thank you for coming on USA Watchdog again. Andrew Hoffman from Miles Franklin, the precious metals people. Thank you for coming on USAWatchdog.com.
Anytime, Greg.